Welcome to the Total Soccer Show and our latest batch of listener questions. On this episode, we're looking at the worst tournament performances in history. We're trying to find out if Tim Weah earned more than his dad. We're looking at players who stayed loyal to the detriment of their careers, and much more. My name's Ryan Bailey. Joining me today, Power Trio, your friend of mine, Taylor Rockwell's here. Hello, Taylor.
Hello, Ryan Bailey. I always enjoy listener questions. I'm especially excited for this one because I have clear answers for some and sort of no idea for some. It's going to be great.
It is going to be great indeed, as it always is, because Graham Russell's here. Hello, Graham. How are you?
I'm very well. Ryan Bailey, how are you? Happy 4th of July. We're definitely recording on the 4th of July as we speak today. How many fireworks are you going to shoot off from the island in the middle of your private pond later this evening?
Many, Graham. I've had my breakfast hot dogs, of course, and I shall have some more lunch hot dogs later on today. For me, Graham, I'm in the UK at the moment, so I'm actually celebrating on this day, which is definitely Friday, Oasis Liberation Day. It's been 16 years, Graham, as we record. On this evening, which is definitely Friday evening, I will be seeing Noel and Liam, and I'm very excited.
Yeah. I'm not going to pretend that I'm not jealous. A little bit jealous. I waited like the rest of the country in that Ticketmaster queue for hours, and like the rest of the country didn't get any tickets. So I'm pleased that as the super fan among us, Ryan, I just hope they're able to stay together. How long's the gig? Like 2 hours? We're thinking like 20 songs, something like that. That seems like it's going to be a task for them.
Maybe.
Ryan, honest question: would you prefer they did just like a whole set and it was great? Or would you prefer they got 75% of the way through and then got into an on-stage fight and broke up there? Like, do you want the full gig and just savor
want that,
it?
Surely.
Or do you want the breakup in front of you?
You want the infamy. You want because then they'll only do one gig. You were at that one gig, and that's surely what you want, right? It's like a sending off. It's like Zidane getting sent off in the World Cup final.
Can I compromise? I'll have half a really good gig, and then it goes massively downhill. How about that?
I think I actually gave you more than that. I should have made it like 25% of a gig. That would have been the challenge. So yes, you may have that. I hope it is enjoyable. Cynical as I would like to be about Oasis, I am very happy that you are happy, Ryan.
Yay! That's what it's all about. And what else is it all about? Patreon.com/Total Soccer Show.
Breakfast
That's
hot
what.
dogs.
And breakfast hot dogs, of course.
Please tell me they're not a real thing. Please tell me, because anytime we are in this episode's coming off the rails quickly. Anytime we are, meaning my family and I are in the States, and we love an American breakfast buffet, there's always a wonderment at some of the options, like Jell-O, or like just a full-on like steak dinner. So breakfast hot dogs, is that a thing?
Steak and eggs is a thing. Breakfast hot dogs is not, though I now wonder why. Because I would definitely eat breakfast sausage, and I can see, like, take a hot dog roll, you put some breakfast sausage in there, you add some eggs, you got a stew going there. I would eat that.
There you go, yeah. You can have breakfast tacos, you can have breakfast steak and eggs. Why can't you have breakfast hot dog? Did we lose a war, Graham?
You got breakfast pizza? Yeah.
Yeah. Breakfast leftover Chinese food. There's so many options.
You know what? I'm adding it to the shopping list. I'm gonna make breakfast hot dogs tomorrow. It's gonna be great.
I bet they're gonna be amazing as well because Taylor's good at cooking. One more time, patreon.com/Total Soccer Show is the best way to support us. Bonus episodes, access to our Discord. We love each and every one of you who is a Patreon. Thank you very much indeed. Also, on our bonus feed, I should say, we've got a question from Robert Ledford, a bonus listener question appearing on the feed. Rob's got a question about the Champions League group phase supporters shield. Yeah, let that one sink in and join us on the Patreon for more of that. And just as a reminder, if you have the website youtube.com, I believe it's available on most devices, you can check out the Total Soccer Show page. Like and subscribe. You cannot see me until I get better internet and I'm not in the United Kingdom. All right, let's get to our listener questions. For this episode, we start off with a question submitted on our Discord from the Bacchanale. Has there ever been a more embarrassing showing in a tournament than LAFC in the Club World Cup? And adding to this, says the Bacchanale, what are the most embarrassing or disappointing team performances in major tournaments throughout history? Now, Taylor, obviously LAFC didn't cover themselves in glory at the Club World Cup, but is it the worst tournament performance that we've seen in history?
It wasn't that bad, was it, LAFC?
Right. Yeah. No, I think we had them as like the team that could potentially get out of their group. Like, I think given some of the relative weakness, but at the same time, it never felt like they were going to, and they didn't really cover themselves in glory. But they are certainly not the worst team at a tournament. I think Unfortunately, that goes to Zaire at the 1974 World Cup. 3 games played, 3 losses, 0 goals for, 14 against, including a 9-0 loss to Yugoslavia. I think they did a little bit better against Brazil, but there was political pressure from dictator Mobutu Sese Seko, and it's why there's like a very infamous clip of one of their players like intentionally kicking a ball away as a free kick is about to be taken, and it's seen as like, oh, look at this guy not understanding the rules and how the wall has to stay 10 yards away, and in reality I think it's him being terrified that if they lost by too much they might be in some trouble, so he's just trying to delay the game as much as he can. So there are more like tragic circumstances in my mind around that one. The one that I've experienced, like that I remember being woeful, is Saudi Arabia in 2002 at the World Cup.
Oh yeah,
that was the one. They were also 3 games played, 3 losses, 0 goals for, 12 against. But I remember that thrashing by Germany in the opener. It was
indoor. I remember it being indoor. That game.
Indoor?
Was it in a baseball stadium or something? I remember that Germany-Saudi Arabia game being in an arena that had a roof. Sorry, continue.
I genuinely couldn't tell if you were saying was it indoors or was it like in the city of Dor, and I was very confused for a moment.
Was it Dower?
I don't know. I just remember that it was the day I took the SATs, and I think it happened that morning, or maybe I can't remember, but I just remember those 2 things happening at the same time, because I remember taking the SATs and thinking, no matter what, I won't be beaten 8-0 by Germany in a global arena, so at least there's that. So that is how I took preemptive solace at my SATs.
Okay. Graham, any nominations for the most disappointing or embarrassing team performances in major tournaments? And don't
I have one more,
say,
by the way, but I'm saving it.
Are you not going to say the USMNT in 1998, are you? You're not going to do it. Oh, Taylor's going to do it. There it is. He's doing it.
But Taylor's going to do it. Well, jump in now. Do it. Why are they on the list?
I think that is maybe the best comparison, because I don't think anything was expected of Zaire or Saudi Arabia in either of those World Cups. Not that anything was truly expected of the United States, aside from maybe from an American perspective. But I remember, like, as a 10-year-old being really excited in 1994 and not quite understanding it even then, but, like, the U.S. beat Colombia, and this is crazy, and it's so fun. And then the Brazil elimination in 94 when Leonardo gets the red card, and like, it felt for a moment like maybe they could actually do something. Like that hype was there. I had the enthusiasm, and 4 years later, when they're going into the '98 World Cup, there's a feeling like they're probably not going to beat Germany, but like Iran, they can definitely get by. And so I guess I feel like there was more expectation and hope for a team that just drastically underperformed. 3 losses, only 1 goal scored, 5 against, obviously losing to Iran. Not just losing, but I think being like outfought, outworked, outclassed by an Iranian team that clearly were up for it and had a point to prove. I remember that being just sort of like the low point in the U.S. at a World Cup, expecting them to compete and really not being able to. 2006 wasn't great either, but there was like a chance they could have gotten out. In that one, it just felt like in 98, they were just never at the races. And so that's the one that I think comes closest to me for LAFC with the Club World Cup.
Yeah, that was one I was going to shortlist, but I didn't. I thought I was scared to at the same time. For reference, by the way, just looked it up. Germany, Saudi Arabia was at the Sapporo Dome in Hokkaido, Japan.
Is that when they rolled the pitch in from outside? I think that was that stadium.
I'm not
England
sure.
Played at that stadium, wasn't it?
It is a baseball
England
stadium.
Argentina was at the Sapporo Dome.
Quite possibly, yeah. But baseball is its primary use. A rare W for my memory. Graham, please go ahead.
Yeah, so this might be recency bias, but I think it holds up pretty well. And Taylor, your point about like expectation level is key for like what the teams that I've put forward, because I think you could argue like Auckland City at this tournament lost 10-0 to Bayern Munich, but people kind of expected that from them. But Qatar at the last World Cup, I think was pretty embarrassing. They were Asian champions. They had spent over a decade going through this program to be competitive at their own World Cup. They spent millions on the Aspire Academy. They played in UEFA qualifying. They did all these things to ensure.
They bought a Belgian club. Yeah.
all those things. They did all these things to like ensure that at their own World Cup they would, put on a good show. And they really didn't. They lost all 3 games in a weak group. A relatively weak group anyway, scored 1 goal in 3 games and were just like comprehensively out of their depth. So that's definitely worse. I think that's the most embarrassing one that I could come up with. Although Scotland at the Euros last year is on my list as well, getting smashed 5-0 by Germany in the first game and then that meek performance against Hungary in the last game. So I'm still hurt from that one, Ryan.
Oh, bless. I'm sorry to hear that, Graham. I hope you feel better soon. The Bacchanale, thank you very much indeed for your question. Braden Parker's been in touch with this one. Sorry, Taylor, go
Ryan.
ahead.
Sorry, I have to ask, and I'm not just doing this just to make you sad. If you were compiling a list of your most disappointing performances, would England in 2014 be on that list, finishing bottom of the group?
It was an honourable mention, or a dishonourable mention from me, was England 2014.
Taylor, I think you'll find it was a terrific tournament. Raheem Sterling hit the side netting against Italy. That was a clear highlight.
I remember that. I remember that.
Take that back.
I thought for all the world he'd scored.
Do you remember how unhinged the narrative was coming out of that tournament, where everyone tried to convince themselves that actually it was quite good in a growing tournament, and England went from 2010 where it was fury that they hadn't won the World Cup at a canter, to then going out in the group stage and losing to Costa Rica. And it was bizarre. Do you remember that? It wasn't just me. I'm sure of it. It was like the media were trying to convince themselves that it was a decent tournament.
I don't remember that. All I remember is Japanese baseball stadiums, Graham. But thank you very much, the Bacchanale, for the question. Braden Parker has this one. If the Confederations Cup was still played the year before the World Cup, how would the USMNT have fared, and what value would it have been for the squad? And Braden is assuming qualification criteria would have remained the same for the Confederations Cup were it still in existence, and it looks like the squads would have been New Zealand, Qatar, Spain, the Ivory Coast, Argentina, Colombia, the US, and Mexico, obviously the 6 winners of the Confederations, and the host traditionally plays in that one. But I suppose, Taylor, if the host plays, technically we should throw Canada in there as well. I was going to say,
right? Shots fired, Canada, in your face. In your face. I think
what do you think,
it goes the same way it went for them as well. So I'm going to add the sort of caveat to that. I'm going to assume this takes priority. So even though we would still have the Club World Cup, maybe the Confederations Cup, you would still get players release, which means we would get Weah and McKinney and maybe Reyna. But I'm going to include Pulisic as well, because I think if it's like Confederations Cup, if it's perceived as a stronger competition, if it is truly the World Cup warm-up, maybe he is there. I won't include Jedi, Dest, Balogun, or Pepe, because I think those were all more so injuries and more so actual wear and tear that required recovery. I think, though, even if we had those players in there, I think it exposes a lot of the same issues we've encountered in this Gold Cup, and maybe even more so depending on the group, because there's a reality in which you get thrown into a group with Spain, Ivory Coast, and Colombia. I don't think that's going to go very well for the U.S. I think we probably don't get out of the group there. I think that means we get fewer competitive reps, and I think we get a hiding in a game or two. And so I think it actually probably ends up hurting the U.S. because we don't have as many games because we're knocked out in the group stage most likely. And I think we come away with fewer opportunities for the U.S. to put together good performances, and we have more concerns about what this team is going to do in a more competitive tournament. So it would be an interesting trial by fire. I just think it's a trial by fire in which we end up in flames pretty quickly.
But I suppose, Graham, more formidable opponents in the Confederations Cup as opposed to the Gold Cup, it could have its benefits, right?
Oh, for sure. I think there's no doubt that for the US this would be a better exercise. I kind of just assumed that it would be a full squad, and Poch has been able to drag Pulisic off the golf course, and maybe Sergino Dest is hanging around to play a few games as well. So, it would have been much more valuable for Pochettino in the US to have the Confederations Cup, because as much as the Gold Cup run has been good and the team hasn't harmed itself yet ahead of that final against Mexico, you're not growing a whole lot from it, because this just isn't the team that's going to play at the World Cup next year. Maybe you get 2 or 3 players that make that step up, but by and large it's not a huge learning exercise. And the other issue with the Gold Cup is, as we mentioned yesterday, it's been a favourable run for the US. The Mexico game in the final is really, if we're being honest, the only time that they'll have played a team on their own level. Whereas in this competition, you are at least going to have a pot 1 team. You're going to have an Argentina. Even if you get a favourable group, you're going to have a Spain and Argentina, even a Colombia. It's going to be a good test. I think there are 2 teams that I would count on or back the US to beat. So that'd be Qatar, the aforementioned Qatar, and New Zealand, and then Mexico. I guess we'll find a bit more about that on that front this weekend, but that's a game that could go either way. So I agree with Taylor. It would depend on how the draw went, where the US, because it was 2 groups, right? It was 2 groups of 4, and then a semi-final and final. So I just don't see any way the US goes beyond a semi-final or makes the final. Although the Confederations Cup was the US's thing, and when was that? 2009.
2009, Which people kind of forget that they only make it out of the group because they beat Egypt, I think, 3-0, and then like Spain beat Italy 3-0. Like they only go through on goal difference after getting destroyed in at least one of the games, if not their first 2 games.
Am I being cynical in that the Confederations Cup, in my mind, isn't really about the soccer? It's about sort of infrastructure and testing stadiums and getting things ready for the
Except in
jamboree that
2009,
happens.
when it was incredibly important.
Apart from that one. That's the obvious exception. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, with the exception of 2009, you're absolutely right. Right.
U.S.
And
There you go. U.S. Won 1 game in the group stage. They lost to Brazil, and they lost to Italy. They lose 3-1 to Italy. They lose 3-0 to Brazil. Then they beat Egypt 3-0. Brazil beats Italy 3-0. So everybody has 1 win except for Brazil. U.S. goes through on goal difference. -2 to -2. So they go through, I think, on goals scored in the end. It's like a very, very fine margin.
I would say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very good. Excellent stuff. Braden Parker, thank you very much indeed for your question. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to try and find out what's in Tim Weah's bank account, balance-wise. Back shortly. Total Soccer Show. Welcome back to our listener questions. Peter Shark has been in touch via our Discord with this one. Has Tim Weah earned more in his career than George Weah? I'm partially curious, says Peter, because he just wants to be nosy, but also he's using it as a proxy for the following. In inflation-adjusted dollars, does a bench player for a good team today earn more than a Ballon d'Or winner from the recent past? That being driven by the explosion in interest and cash in soccer. It's a very good question, Graham, I would say. Tim Weah has had 9 seasons thus far in top European teams. George Weah, by my account, 21 seasons and was literally the best player in the world at one point with that Ballon d'Or. My findings were that he was one of the highest paid African footballers of all time when he was at Milan. He earned a silly amount of money at Man City for some reason. I think that would have been in the pre-oil days as well. Did you find any concrete numbers here, Graham?
Yes and no. So it's a little bit speculative, but I think we can try and draw a conclusion from it. So the numbers that I found on Tim Weah is that he earns $55,000 a week at Juve, which works out at around $2.9 million a year.
I think it's 56,000 if you round it up. Thank you very much.
Okay, right. Well, 56,000.
Changes
We'll call
everything.
it a cool
Math guy
$3
over
mil
here.
a year.
I think you'll find it's 2.9 million. But
Do you want to work out the tax, Taylor? Or
No, I'm good.
yeah, I didn't try to do that. I didn't.
Chelsea's
attempt that 'cause that
accountant
feels
over
like
here.
Yeah. So anyway, just ignoring the tax. So Tim Weah has been on that contract since 2023. So he has made 5.8 million at Juve. Before that, he's at Lille for 4 years, where apparently he earned $15,000 a week, which works out at just over £500,000 a year. So that's another $2 million for when he's at Lille. Then before that, he is a pro at PSG for a couple years, where apparently this was, I've struggled to find anything on this, but I used kind of like a wage structure from now for youth players at PSG, and it seemed like he would earn around $150,000 a year. So we're talking around $8 million in salary over about 7 years. Keep in mind there's also endorsements and bonuses, and he'll receive payments for playing for the US as well and playing at the World Cup. So I added up what I could find on that stuff as well, and I got to just over $9 million that Tim Weah has made throughout the course of his career. With George Weah, it was even trickier because obviously he played decades ago. Joe had this method of, when we're talking about this in our Slack chat, he had this method of looking at some of the highest paid soccer players of that time. So a Forbes article said that Chris Sutton was the highest paid player in the Premier League in 1994. He was earning $800,000 a year at that time. I then found another article that said in the late 90s, the mid to late 90s, Serie A clubs were paying the highest salaries in world football at that time. Weah played for AC Milan. He was their best player, also their most expensive transfer when they signed him. So it stands to reason that he would be their highest paid player. He won the Ballon d'Or. So for argument's sake, this is where it gets a little bit sketchy because I don't know for sure. Let's put him on $1 million a year, which is more than Chris Sutton. You know, Italian clubs are paying the most. He's paying the most. He's one of their best players. And then apparently, according to Calcio Mercato, when he went to AC Milan, he doubled his wages when he came from Marseille. He was at before he was at AC Milan. So that's another $2.5 million over that period. He was on $50,000 a week at City. That didn't last long, but he was in on a similar moment at Marseille. So that's another $1 million. So that's him on around $8.5 million. Plus endorsements. He had a deal with Puma So I reckon he just about made more than Tim, but then you adjust for inflation and it's quite a lot more.
What about, are you including the presidential salary for the Liberian government as well?
I'm not, but maybe that really tips the
Might
scales
tip it
in
over.
his favour.
Yeah. Taylor?
I mean, that's the story, right? That like one of the reasons why he's elected is because he made so much money as a footballer that he's perceived as being less likely to be corrupt because he already has money, so he won't then embezzle it from the government. Whether or not that's an actual true story, I know that was a narrative that did the rounds when he was elected. Yeah, I think Graham was more comprehensive in his numbers because I saw the 1 million, I saw 2 million for Milan. 3 million seemed to be the consensus number, and then it was up to like 6 or 7 million, which felt exorbitant. But yeah, 3 million in 1995 would be about 6.3 million today. So I think you add all that up, and I think George made more than Tim has made now. But I think that probably changes in another couple of years, especially if Weah continues to perform well and maybe gets another move, especially if he goes to the Premier League because the wages are so much higher now in the Premier League. And that is, I think, to get to the spirit of the question, like Weah might be an exception there. I think largely, and if you go back maybe a season or two before George Weah wins the Ballon d'Or, the answer is definitely yes, that you have squad players, like especially in the Premier League with how much money is there, making considerable amounts more than Ballon d'Or winners would have. And a lot of that is commercial revenue and TV revenue kind of folded together, and you're just going to have so much more money in the game. I also think it was interesting reading about this that like there's a direct correlation with the Bosman ruling and the increase in salaries. So it's worth noting that like before free agency, it's going to be harder to get a higher salary for longer because clubs are just going to own your rights. So they don't really have to do anything. When that changes, they then do. So it's a really interesting question and is a good kind of reminder of how much more money there is in the game at present.
Yeah, and some anecdotal evidence of that, Taylor. I've actually met and interviewed a Ballon d'Or winner. I met Dennis Law once up in Aberdeen when I was working for STV and did an interview with him. And I say this not to like shame him in any way, but he turned up in like a pretty standard Volvo, like a state Volvo. And the thing with him living in Aberdeen was everyone kind of knew where Dennis Law lived, and so when we were driving to the interview, the camera person who was from Aberdeen, knew the city, was like, "That's where Dennis Law lives." It was a nice enough house, like it was nothing wrong with it, but you wouldn't exactly say that was the natural home of a Ballon d'Or winner and like one of the best players who ever played for Manchester United. So I think that just kind of shows the growth of the money that these players are earning in the modern age.
I mean, I think like a good example of that would be Eric Cantona in the 95-96 season for Manchester United when he is like fully at his peak. He's on £20,000 a week. So that's a little over £1 million a year. That's 2.2 million adjusted for inflation, or maybe that's dollars. Ronaldo, I think his newest deal is 750,000 euros a week in Saudi Arabia. Like it's different. It's different football these days.
Hey, they could both afford karate lessons. That's what we learned in the 90s. Anyway,
this is true.
I would say. I think the real anecdotal test for the Weyahs is when they go to a restaurant. Let's say they meet in New York. They go to the finest Italian restaurant.
George is 1,000% paying.
Who's paying? Who's picking up the check?
George, definitely.
George?
Yes. George doesn't strike me as a dude who is letting his son flex on him.
Yeah, and also we've learned that if you take Tim Weah to an Italian restaurant, there's no way he's paying. So,
dude, that interview I had just seen the quotes. Have you watched the actual interview?
Yeah, I watched the whole thing. Yeah,
I already love Tim Weah, and I am still sort of convinced that he is the USA's first like true superstar one day. Like I think he has that potential. In terms of on-field performance, but also like off-field charisma. And the way he just answers what McKinney is saying with sounds, like he's like, "Can I say you something about Italian food?" Like, it's a little bit the same. Like I can't even come close to it. But it's so funny how much he conveys just making like two little sounds. I love Tim Weah. I think he would try to pay Ryan, and I think maybe on certain special occasions, George lets him picks up the check. But I think of Tony Soprano when Meadows' boyfriend tries to pay and Tony like loses his mind. I feel like that's how George is going to be. Like, no son of mine will pay for me. I will pay for everything. How dare you?
What if I'm picturing like Tim gets out Amex Platinum card and then George goes Amex Black card. and then they sort of have an Amex off.
Here's my Scrooge McDuck vault. I will pay with my
Very
gold
good.
coins.
All right, Peter Shark, thank you very much for your excellent question there. We go to Nick Price, who has an excellent question as well. Who are some of the most prominent players to have never contributed to their national teams? I'm an FC Dallas fan, says Nick, so watching Lucho Acosta this season has prompted this question. Top 5 MLS player for the last 5 years with an MVP trophy in his cabinet and has never been capped. Are there any more prominent examples of quality players that were blocked out by even more significant talent? Graham, there's one name in English soccer that stands out to me, and it still stuns me that he never played for the England team. He was in the heart of the Manchester United defence for much of the early Fergie years. Steve Bruce never played for England and for the A team. Wild.
Is that because he was like mid-90s, right? Like he's the first good Ferguson Man United team, right?
Yep.
Like, by the time they get to the end of the 90s, he's no longer in that team. So I'm just trying to think like who would be ahead of him. Like Tony Adams would have been like Lee Dixon. Oh, Lee Dixon was a left back, wasn't he, around that time?
Butch.
Who was keeping him out? Like Tony Adams, Terry Butcher, yeah. It just feels like he was a little bit before the era of English defenders, which was like Ferdinand, Terry, Sol Campbell. So like it's surprising that he didn't get a look in. So yeah, he was on my list as well.
Yeah. Especially because England, famously so strong at World Cup 1994, it makes sense that you wouldn't need a reliable defender in there. I'm just taking shots at England today. Ryan, are you enjoying this?
Far too many, yeah. But I'm loving it. Graham, anyone else on your list? There's a few other English ones actually I had who maybe don't qualify because. Sorry, what was that?
Harvey Barnes. Just give him to us.
We've got so many great Harveys. Plenty of good Harveys to go around, actually, for us, Graham. Jimmy Bullard was one. I don't know if he played. I need to look up whether he actually
got called up. So he got called up but never got capped. I'm sure that's the Jimmy Bullard's thing. Okay. But I mean, he would, like, obviously charismatic, memorable player, had his moments, but like, let's be honest, he wasn't of that level. So
hey, you take that back.
There's more bemusement that Steve Bruce didn't get any more caps. On an England tangent here, Ryan. So Mikel Arteta had a great career in the Premier League. Played for PSG. Did he come through the system at Barcelona? Obviously, then ends up playing for Arsenal. But never got a look in or a cap for Spain because of obviously how good their midfield was at that time. And there was, I don't know if you remember this, Ryan. There was a bit of chatter that England tried to recruit him as a dual national. Someone who'd, was it the 5-year rule was in place at that time, so he'd lived in England for 5 years and so he could have played for England, but obviously that never happened. And then similar to Arteta, sticking with Spain, Gabi, who was Atletico Madrid sort of captain and leader for a long time when they won the title. Again, never capped for Spain just because there were some guys called Xavi and Iniesta and Busquets ahead of him in the pecking order.
Wow. Great. I think that was my number one answer, Graham. I would agree. I think Gabi is the best example because he is very good, and it's when Atleti are making Champions League finals and winning La Liga, but he still can't get a look because that midfield is so strong. To your point about Arteta, you all might say I'm crazy. I feel like there was a similar, tiny bit of momentum about Adrian, the goalkeeper, that maybe he could also jump ship and play for England because there's a period of time when he is West Ham's goalkeeper, but that might be wrong. I think it was an Arsenal goalkeeper who then went to West Ham.
Oh, it's Almunia.
That's it. That's the one who I think never gets in for Spain. And there was a little bit of speculation that maybe he could jump ship as well. Obviously, he does not. On that note, it's not never played, but I would say Pepe Reina maybe deserves honorable mention. He plays 36 times for Spain, which is a lot more than 0. But that's in a 13-year career with the national team, but it's Iker Casillas there. And then, it's basically Pepe Reina is in every single team. He technically, if you look at his list of awards, won 2008 Euros, 2010 World Cup, 2012 Euros. I think in all 3 of those tournaments combined, he plays 1 game in the group stage in 2008.
Scott Carson paradigm.
Yes, exactly. So he's gotten a lot of caps, but over a 13-year career is not nearly as many as you would think, and it's largely because Iker Casillas was ahead of him.
Yeah.
And then one more notable one, a player who never got called up by his senior national team. He makes 1 appearance for their B team. It's not really because others were ahead of him, though there probably were others. It's Paolo Di Canio, who had maybe other reasons why Italy didn't want him in and around that national team. I think he was perceived as...
I don't know. I think they would have wanted him, Taylor, for those reasons.
Yeah, you never know. Yeah. But I think at the very least,
chances.
he has the falling out with Trapattoni, right? That's a pretty famous one, which is why he leaves Italy and goes to Scotland in the first place. And I think is just maybe perceived as a malcontent and then some. So no call-ups for him at senior level for Italy.
I've just thought one off the top of my head, another 90s one. David Ginola. Did he play for France? Because he was like one of the best Premier League players, right?
17 times.
He's like their Letizia, Ryan, where like he did play for them, but nowhere near as much as perhaps he should have.
Okay.
I should add, I don't just know David Ginola's number of caps. He came up in the research as well.
Okay. Are you watching one of his shampoo commercials right now?
I mean, always. That's my second screen. Graham has other football on. I just have that on the loop. And definitely what you're talking about, too.
Oh, you should YouTube it. I recommend it. It's wonderful. Nick Price, thank you very much indeed for your question there. We'll take one more quick break. When we come back, we're talking about whether Harry Kane has regrets and much more. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to our listener questions. Chris Welter has been in touch with this one. Harry Kane almost certainly could have won silverware and been considered among the best of his generation had he moved to a bigger club sooner. What are some other examples of players who missed out on glory by staying loyal to their clubs? Any hometown heroes who would have been remembered as one of the best if they transferred to a bigger club? Now, Taylor, I've got a couple of examples. I think one more pertinent than the other. The one I'm going to bring up first is the one I'm not sure if he qualifies for this question because he's still remembered as one of the best.
Yeah.
It's Francesco Totti, right?
Yep. That's the answer. Yeah.
But I mean, obviously, he's still remembered as one of the best and is still a god in Rome.
I mean, is he though?
So,
is that true? Like about Totti?
I would say that is a really interesting question, and I think kind of gets to the heart of the question for me because I'm not like, do we accept the premise of this question in the first place? Like, I feel like a lot of people do consider Harry Kane to be amongst the best of his generation. He just also didn't win a lot of silverware, and I think Francesco Totti is a prime example of that. Like, we still think of him as an exceptionally good player who did a lot and was incredible. He just also played for a Roma team that only won Serie A once, right? And Coppa Italia maybe once. So, like, he is still really fondly remembered, but also, yes, definitely could have gotten a move, had a strong link with Real Madrid, right? And I think that
like 3 times, I think.
Yeah, there's the quote, I would say somewhat famous quote, winning 1 title with Roma is worth 10 with Real Madrid. Choosing to play for Roma, and so still beloved, still remembered really, really well, but also would have won silverware. And I think that's a very good connection to what the question is asking when it comes to Harry Kane.
Yeah, I think with Totti, like, obviously, you know, a Roma icon, maybe one of the best Italian players of like recent times, of the last couple of decades or whatever. I still feel like had he made that move to Real Madrid, where keep in mind that Real Madrid team is the you know, Zidane, Figo, Brazilian Ronaldo team, Roberto Carlos, all those guys. If he joins that team, I just feel like he elevates himself to like, if we were talking legends, like global legends of the last 20 years, I feel like you would get quite far down the list before you got to Francesco Totti, and so I think that's why he is probably the answer to this question. We're like, great player, but could have elevated himself, certainly could have won more by going to Real Madrid. Someone that I think maybe doesn't fit this question so well, but still is on my list, and I'll mention him, is Steven Gerrard, who I think would be mentioned as like one of the best midfielders of all time, legitimately, but obviously has that sliding door moments with Chelsea where Jose Mourinho wants to sign him, he hands in the transfer request, he ends up obviously retracting it, stays at Liverpool, and he does win like the Champions League, and he plays another final, and he wins the FA Cup, but obviously if he'd gone to Chelsea...
that list petered out fast.
It did. Never wins the Premier League, which just feels, you know, not befitting for
when
a player.
When you mentioned that sliding moment,
quality.
I thought you meant the sliding moment on the field against...
No, there's another sliding moment.
Sorry.
Not that one.
Let's talk more about that.
That makes Taylor happy.
For the Totti example, I think it's fascinating because I think if you told Totti he'd have it all over again, would he go to Real Madrid? I don't think he would. I think he'd still stay in Rome. I don't think that man's ever bought a beer in the city of Rome for himself. He said that like winning the Scudetto with Roma was more important than winning the World Cup for him. He's one of those guys. And I'll give you a lovely anecdotal detail from my 2 years living in the city. My wife worked in a school there. I think 50% of the boys in that school were called Franchi or Francesco for one reason, because their parents were of that age where he is God. So there you have it. He's still...
Have we proven that he isn't?
No, not this.
When he comes back for Como next season, then
He keeps talking about it, Graham. I'd love to see it. One player.
He's in good shape. I was gonna jump in and say that man has not only has he not bought a beer for himself in Rome, it's because he's not had a beer, I think, since he retired.
He plays a lot of paddle.
That he's in.
A lot of paddle. Yeah. Sorry, Taylor.
Can I say one more thing, because we've already covered him? Steven Gerrard is a great answer, Graham, and I fully agree with you that I think is beloved by Liverpool supporters and is, I think, regarded by England supporters. But I think if he had moved to Chelsea and won a bunch of silverware, or moved to Real Madrid, where he was also heavily linked and won some silverware, I think it definitely elevates that name. I saw this thing this week, I think it was on Reddit, that kind of blew my mind. So that slip is against Chelsea, correct? And Chelsea go in and score. Do you all know who was celebrating when Chelsea scored that goal? On the pitch celebrating?
Mourinho?
Mohamed Salah. Very strange moment playing for Chelsea. Yeah, an odd one to see him in there celebrating a Chelsea goal. And then off he bounces and eventually goes back to Liverpool.
What happened to him? Went to Roma, like Totti. That's right. There you go.
Fiorentina in there too, I think. He bounces. He has a good little time in Italy before.
There you go.
Then doing some things for Liverpool, I think.
One more name I'll mention in potential answer to this question is a name that's come up earlier in this episode.
Yep.
Matt Letizia, who obviously he's from Guernsey, which is on the sort of just across the water in Southampton, but very, very loyal to Southampton, and easily I think he was offered a Man United job a couple of times. Easily could have gone to a much bigger team, but chose
Chelsea would have made him the most expensive transfer in English football at the time, and I think Blackburn moved to match that, and he just kind of didn't want it.
Yeah,
I love
his reasons.
He might actually be the answer to this over Totti, just because, at least Totti was at Roma and won a Scudetto, and Matt Letizia, not being disrespectful to Southampton, but last season they were almost the worst team in Premier League history, so they've got a very different standing. Can I throw another slightly left field name into the ring?
Yes.
Iker Muniain, who spent basically the bulk of his career at Athletic Club, could have gone to Bayern, was close to going to Tottenham Hotspur, rejected both of them, and only left last year to go to San Lorenzo in Argentina just for the banter, just for the experience of playing in Argentinian football. So he's very much an anomaly. I mean, the thing with Athletic Club is they actually pay their players really well because they don't pay transfer fees, and that's one of the reasons Nico Williams has stuck around for so long, and a few others as well stick around for longer than you would expect. But nonetheless, he's a bit of an anomaly in the modern game.
I bet Athletic Club probably have a few of those. Nico Williams might become one because he'll probably end up never leaving at this point. So we'll see.
Possibly.
Chris Walter, great question. Thank you very much indeed. One more for this episode from Captain Manly. Captain Manly on our Discord. Wonderful handle. This is a question for you all to answer. In what ways is soccer art? This isn't asking about posters, photos, and such like that, but rather ball at your feet, soccer, coaching tactics, the actual game happening. This question was inspired, says Captain Manly, by attending a local arts festival with his wife while watching soccer on his phone, presumably. So, for me, Taylor, there's one key example I find soccer to be art. It is particular players and the way they move, and particularly those players who move differently to other ones. And the three who stand out in my mind is one we've mentioned already, David Ginola, who just moved differently to everybody else. Just slinky is how I describe it. The other one is Zinedine Zidane, who is the archetype.
Yes,
just
correct.
Looks different to everybody else on the ball. And
His
I'd say
feet
maybe
don't
third.
leave the ground. That's the weird aspect of Zinedine Zidane.
So
when
is he
runs,
walking the whole
his
time,
feet
then?
are always.
That's the definition of walking.
It's a really strange thing. I know it sounds silly. It's because of the way he's always kind of reading the game and reacting. But if you watch Zidane, a 21st Century Portrait, it's a thing for the first 20 minutes of that game. He's always dragging his toes. His feet don't leave the ground because he's never really sprinting. But he's also always able to kind of just adjust a little bit and have little hip swivels and stuff. I totally agree with you on that one, Ryan.
He's like a shark, really graceful in his movement, but he's got a pounce in him at some point if he needs it.
Yes,
so
he does.
That's Zidane. The third one I was going to mention, Graham, Ronaldinho. Who just you, if you had a silhouette of any of those players, you'd be able to tell who they were without knowing their identities, I think. And I think that's art for me.
Maradona, too, I feel kind of has that same bounciness of Ronaldinho, the bouncy fluidity.
Yeah.
I like that.
I would agree with that. Yeah. I think so. Zidane was immediately the player that I thought of in relation to this question, and I tried to break this question down of what try and answer the question of what is it about soccer that makes it art. So where I landed is in storytelling, right? So soccer tells stories. It tells stories of cultures, and there's individual players with stories and even tactics. And in fact, Inverting the Pyramid is, for anyone who's read it, and I haven't read the whole lot, I have to admit, but I read enough to yes, that's the secret of that book. But I've read enough to know that it's really a book about how people get this wrong all the time. It's a book about how history influenced tactics rather than like an opus of tactics. And so art, without getting too pretentious about it, because I don't know a huge amount about art, art needs to say something, right? It needs a story. And then you have the fact that soccer is a visual story, and there's undeniable beauty in soccer and the way it's played. And you compare it to something like rugby or even tennis. And I'm a big tennis fan, but it doesn't have the same sort of like kinetic energy as soccer, the same synchronization with 22 players on the field. And then where I landed, this led me to, was the realisation that Zinedine Zidane is the greatest football artist of all time. And as you, Taylor, you said 21st Century Portrait. Is that the film?
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't remember the name of it, but it's set to a Mogwai soundtrack, and I've got it on Blu-ray. But the way that he played was just so like visually appealing. But then you also have the fact that there's the story behind Zidane. There's the fact that he is the embodiment of France's multiculturalism in the 90s, and the role he plays in the Rainbow team that won the World Cup, and obviously his links to Algeria. Then finishes his career by headbutting someone in a World Cup final, and there's statues around the world apparently of that headbutt. And also his goal in the Champions League final at Hampden. There's a big mural at Hampden of that goal. So he is quite literally art, Zinedine Zidane, in those statues and in those murals. But I think in terms of just like his whole vibe, yeah, he was art.
It's weird that he finished his international career on a red card, because at club level, he finished his career on a red card. Outstanding consistency from Zinedine Zidane. Graham,
Art!
I love that answer. And I, too, don't know that much about art. I would say, I think the value that art has can be like what we as a society or a collective or a group assigns to it. And so I think that kind of goes to your storytelling point. But I think art can also just have value if it individually appeals. And so for me, first of all, the answer is like there are so many different moments and ways in which soccer is art, but I would spotlight a few. That, like, for me, I think when you just see certain things, it's just like it's enjoyable. Even if you don't like soccer or love soccer, there are moments, and it can be sequences or one specific moment, that like you will just get how good it was, even if you don't know a ton about soccer. And I would say a really lovely counter-attacking goal is so aesthetically pleasing that it qualifies as art. There are two very good examples of that come immediately to mind. There's the Ajax goal against Manchester United in 1995, where they are it's just quick passes all around like their own 18, and then suddenly they spring this counterattack by passing through Manchester United, a very physical Manchester United, and they score a lovely goal, but it's a lot of quick passing. But the better example, it ends up becoming a Joga Bonito Nike commercial. It's the one when they're like all the Brazilian players are kind of like warming up in the locker room, and the music's playing, and they're like kicking a shoe around. That I think it turns into an exhibition of skills that ends in like a kind of small-sided game that then they kind of dance out onto the field, and it turns into a real-life goal that they actually scored against Chile in World Cup qualifying in 2006. If you can find it, go watch. It is a genuinely beautiful goal where every single part of it starts with like a skillful move after they win the ball back in the box to just like fluid counterattacking, and it ends with like a pass and then a tap in, but all of them are executed perfectly, and it's really aesthetically pleasing. I think that can be art. I think technical precision that is so obvious when it happens that you will just enjoy it can be art. I think Diego Luna's goal against Guatemala is a good example of that. The Thierry Henry half volley against Manchester United, I'm just kind of mocking my own club here, but the one
where he flicks it over his shoulder
and then hits it, like the technical precision required to do that, but also the way the ball hangs, the way he strikes it, the curvature after he strikes it, all of that is so aesthetically pleasing that to me it just becomes art. Individual expression is when it's evident in the goal or in a moment when you can see individuality in performance. And Ryan, to your point, like I think body language and body shape and way of moving is a good example of that. The greatest example of individual expression in a goal for me is Eric Cantona's chip, where he's just like the stopping and standing with his arms out, like, are you not entertained?
Yeah.
And just looking around, like, that is truly art. Stopping in that moment and looking at him with his just like, yeah, I did it. So what? Like, and Dimitar Berbatov had a lot of that in his catalog as well. And the final one, since I'm going very long, I think when the physical demands of executing a moment like require ballet levels of precision or gymnastic ability, the Zidane full volley out of the air for Real Madrid against AC Milan would qualify in that one. Even like the Dennis Bergkamp goal against Argentina in the 98 World Cup, where he brings it down, megs the player, hits the volley. All of that is like, it's ballet. It's like ballet and gymnastics and also controlling a ball at full speed. It just becomes elevated. It's truly a beautiful moment. It is why I think we call it the beautiful game, for that and many other reasons. But I loved this question because it just made me think about what I truly love and the moments I truly love. And those are a few.
The Van Persie goal at the 2014 World Cup, like the image of him completely in the air, as I've never seen a goal like that since. It was completely unique.
Yeah, dude, totally. But Graham, man, you've now got me with the storytelling, and I think another one that hadn't really occurred to me until this moment is, and I know we're not talking about like posters or the like, but it is like kind of individual freeze frames of, I've always loved celebrations and watching celebrations and how players celebrate and who celebrates and when. And I think like we're recording this like the week that U.S. just beat Guatemala in the Gold Cup, and even like Berhalter's celebrations after Luna scored, he's like so happy and loved the goal from Luna for the second one. You can see his joy, and I think moments when you can see a whole collective group of individuals coming together, all from different walks of life and different backgrounds, but all experiencing a moment of like pure happiness. That is why goals are great. You see it with the crowd behind them. And a really good example of like what I am talking about that comes immediately to mind is there's a freeze frame image of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer after he scores the winner in the Champions League final. And it's him, for people who are watching, they can see this, but it's a freeze frame of him like eyes closed, like hands right around his face, like celebrating with both fists and his mouth open, but he's being absolutely mobbed by his teammates at the same time. And it's like almost oh man, what's the Last Supper? It's like Last Supper levels of like there's chaos all around him, there's all these people around him, but he has just this still moment of like pure joy that is like truly art when you see it. So another great one for me.
Yeah, another great question. Some warm and fuzzy answers here. I'm loving this very much. Hang them all in the Louvre, I say. One point of business, though, before we end the episode. I'm probably the least tactically inclined of the TSS group. Am I the only one of us who's read Inverting the Pyramid? For real?
All the way through?
So. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. Especially the revised edition. I've read like the old one that stops
in
much
Hungary in the 30s.
Long ago. Yeah, exactly. That was it for me. Yeah, it's all about coffee houses and nothing else for me.
Ryan asked me the last time I read a book, and I will not answer you.
I'm kind of the same, Graham.
Yeah.
Kind of, unfortunately.
Who has the time?
Who has the time, indeed? When you're watching 16 games a day, like you and me, who just is apparently too lazy to read a book. Captain Manley, thank you very much indeed for that question. Thank you to everybody who submitted a question. TotalSoccerShow.com/questions if you'd like to do so. Or you can choose our preferred method. Patreon.com/TotalSoccerShow. And you can have a chat with us in our Discord. Come say hi. Talk to us about anything in there. Submit a list of question. Thank you very much indeed to everybody who's done so once again. Taylor Rockwell, thank you very much indeed to you and your voice and the things you've done with your voice over the past hour or so. Thank you.
Right back at you, my friend.
Graham Ruthven, pleasure as always, my good man. I hope you.
It's art. It was art.
So I'm sorry. I just had hot dogs for breakfast today, so I'm in a bit of a mood. But Graham Ruthven, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Ryan Bailey.
And listener, thank you very much. Enjoy the 4th of July. Happy 4th. Happy Oasis Liberation Day for those who celebrate as well. We'll be back on the feed next week, of course. But for now, bye.